Tonight, the RNC is moving into West Coast communities, and 2 St. John's teens are sentenced for their part in a brutal high school attack.
This is CBC Here and Now.
Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. 2 teens have been sentenced to jail time for their role in a violent attack at a St. John's high school last winter. An attack that sent a student to hospital. Here and Now's Heather Gillis has the latest.
2 teens involved in a violent attack outside Prince of Wales Collegiate School in St. John's back in March were sentenced in provincial court on Monday. 5 boys ranging in age from 14 at the time of the attack to 18 were arrested and charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, and assault with a weapon. The boy they allegedly attacked suffered a severe head injury and was taken to the Janeway Children's Hospital. The 2 youths sentenced Monday had been charged with attempted murder, but instead pled guilty to the lesser charge of aggravated assault. A provincial court judge sentenced one boy who was 14 at the time of the attack to a maximum of 24 months. That'll break down to 16 months at the province's Youth Correction Centre in Whitburn and 8 months under community supervision. The teen, who can't be identified, has been in custody since March, but won't be at the centre for very much longer due to time already served. The other minor was 16 and sentenced to 18 months in total. He's been in custody since September.
The Crown Prosecutor, Nicole Hurley, tells CBC News that the facts of this case and exactly what happened here are banned. That's because the courts still need to deal with 3 others. 2 are youth and will be back in court at the end of this month. So will Tyler Greening. He's the 18-year-old being tried as an adult. He'll be back in court on January 25th. Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
The Royal Newfoundland Constabulary is moving into more communities on the island's west coast, areas that were once covered by the RCMP. But as Here and Now's Colleen Connors reports, some are uneasy about the switch.
Massey Drive, a town of about 1,800, sits on a huge hill right next to Corner Brook.
We respect the RCMP. The fact is they didn't have the resources to give us the community policing that we needed as a community.
Starting next month, the RNC will take over in the area, something the mayor welcomes. He says a few officers stationed in Corner Brook live here already.
The RNC has assured us that we would get regular patrols daily through our community, and we'll take care of some of the issues. We don't have huge issues here, but like any town of our size, there are things that come up. One of the issues that we would have is there's a lot of speeding through our town.
The expansion was first announced by the province last summer. About 33,000 residents on the west coast will soon be served by the RNC. The province says it's a way to make more people feel safe and secure.
That's us, we're right in here.
On the North Shore in Cox's Cove, the mayor sees one RCMP officer drive through his community once a day. A stark contrast, he says, to a time when it was commonplace to see several patrol cars several times a day.
The lower the presence, the higher the speeds and everything else that is incorporated with, we always ride that fine line, 50 kilometers an hour between here and Corner Brook. I'm kind of in a rush today, so 50 turns into 70, right? The 80 turns into 100. So without the policing, those are the things that happens, and the tendency is for that to rise.
The RNC says it sent more officers to the west coast to help cover the region. But Shepherd is not sold on the switch. He worries, like the RCMP's shrinking resources, the same cuts could come to the constabulary. And with a dwindling population of 600, it's a real concern.
How long is that going to last? The public sector is the first to get hit when it comes to cutbacks, and when the government got to cut spending, it's the public sector. So yes, it looks good this year.
So he'll wait and see how the new policing strategy plays out through the year. Meanwhile, the RCMP say it will continue to manage ongoing files during the transition.
The RNC is not providing a whole lot of detail about this expansion. We don't know how much money is going into this expansion or how many new officers will be patrolling these communities. But one thing both mayors agree on is that this change is probably a sign of what's to come for other communities across this province. Colleen Connors, CBC News, Corner Brook.
Well, St. John's Dockyard has been awarded a $34 million project to refit a Coast Guard ship. New Dock will be handling the conversion of the Judy LaMarche. The icebreaker was built in 2010. The refit will see an overhaul of its propulsion, communication, and navigation systems. The work, which will start in December, will take more than a year to complete and will create about 80 new jobs. Despite the size of the project, New Dock says it's confident it can meet the March 2025 deadline.
So the spin-off of the project, I wouldn't want to throw a number at it, but the spin-off for the project locally is pretty significant, right? Not only is that $34 million is a total project value, but that's not all coming here. Part of that is involved with other people outside as well.
The length of the job is much longer. We've done a few Coast Guard VLE projects that have been in the same time frame, so it's not new to us. But most refits in here are 6 to 8, 10 weeks. These are certainly longer and a little more complex.
Harvey's Home Heating is taking over North Atlantic's oil accounts in the greater metro region. Starting next month, Harvey's will begin servicing North Atlantic customers. Now, the company says the changeover will be automatic and accounts will be transferred with close attention to protecting privacy, and no action will be required from customers. Loblaws owned grocery stores will no longer offer a 50% discount on foods nearing their expiration date. Meat, fruit, and vegetables are among the most common items to get the markdown, but now it appears the discount will top out at 30%. Loblaws owns the Dominion chain in this province, as well as the store No Frills. Just last month, CEO Galen Weston told a government committee that his company had meaningfully reduced prices on everyday items. Well, tomorrow will be a full circle day for Chief Mizel Joe. After 5 decades in community politics, he'll be retiring from his administrative role with the Mi'kmaq First Nation on the same date as he was sworn in back in 1982. Chief Joe plans to stay on as a cultural and spiritual chief, and while he plans to spend more time with family, he still has projects to complete, including the repatriation of Beothuk remains from Scotland and continuing the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He says the community has seen great success with various business ventures and company partnerships, and he hopes that growth will continue.
The more business we get into and as more own source revenue come back into our community, my hope is that somewhere along the way that we'll have enough home source revenue that we don't no longer have to depend on the federal government for funds. I mean, it's our funds. There's certainly a fiduciary obligation from the federal government to us, but not be under that thumb all the time that we need that money to survive and to build. We want our own money coming back into our community, earned by ourselves, by our people, so that home source revenue can help build an even better, stronger community. And that includes building the language and the culture, and more for the schools and the clinic. All those things are part of what we're trying to build.
Well, quiet day today, but our next weather maker moves in as we head through the overnight, bringing snow, potential for some ice pellets and freezing rain, as well as some rain and wind. I'll get into all the details when I come back.
Time for a look at the weather, and Ashley, today felt kind of like the calm before the storm. Maybe it was a beautiful day, but there's a lot of messy weather on the way.
Yeah, it certainly was. Lots of sunshine this morning. Took the dogs for a walk. Beautiful out there. It was a bit chilly, that's for sure, but as long as you dress for it, definitely enjoying some of that sunshine. -2 was our daytime high today in St. John's across the island, generally into the minus single digits. A little cooler for coastal areas of Labrador, sitting around -11 in Happy Valley, Goose Bay, and -13 this afternoon in Lab City. So we do have our next weather maker moving in, bringing snow to portions of New Brunswick as well as Nova Scotia and PEI. And we're starting to see that transition now to rain, and that is exactly what is going to happen as we head through tonight across the island and up across portions of Labrador as well. A pretty colorful warning map today. We've got winter storm warnings, wind warnings, wreck house wind warnings, as well as rainfall warnings for the south coast or the southern portion of the Avalon, as well as the Burin Peninsula. And then we've got a blowing snow advisory pretty much everywhere, with the exception of where we're seeing those winter storm warnings as well as the rainfall warnings. And then up across Labrador, blowing snow and winter storm warnings are in place. So let's time out what's going to happen. We're looking at our temperatures very chilly tonight, especially up across Labrador, -19 to about -24, a little warmer for those of you in Cartwright. But we do have those chilly temperatures across the island as well. This is why things are going to start as snow. So we'll start to see that snow move in. I have the wind gusts on here for you as well, just so we can time out the wind. But we should see that snow start around 9 or 10 o'clock tonight. Eventually, it is going to spread across the island as we get into about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And then we start to see that transition. Note the winds along the west coast and south coast of the island, anywhere from 80 to as much as 100 kilometers per hour. But those areas that are prone to southeasterlies could see those winds gusts between 120, maybe even 130. Wreck house area could see 140 kilometer per hour wind gusts in that period. We will see by the time we get to about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, we're going to start to see, or 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, I should say, along the TCH, if you have to travel, you'll likely start to get into some ice pellets and or freezing rain. And then below that for the Burin Peninsula as well as the Avalon and really all along the south coast, you're looking at that changing over to rain fairly quickly. This will also be when you see some of your strongest wind gusts. Now, by the time we get to 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, most of eastern Newfoundland and through central will be in that rain section, and some of this will be heavy at times, particularly for eastern Newfoundland. So that will continue through most of the morning into the early afternoon as well, and this will be all snow for those of you up across Labrador. At this point, you're still looking at your winds gusting anywhere from 60 to about 70 kilometers per hour. Now, once that rain moves off, the winds will ease a little bit through the day, but they're still going to be 50 to 60 kilometers per hour. And then we'll see the temperatures drop and snow squall potential sets up. And that will be the story really through Thursday for a good chunk of the island. But most of that snow will continue for coastal areas of Labrador as well. So how much snow are we talking about? This is before the changeover. So this is through Wednesday afternoon, between 5 to 15 centimeters across the island. But around Green Bay, White Bay area, and maybe through Deer Lake, you could be seeing those amounts closer to 15 or 20 centimeters of snow. And again, this is just through Wednesday afternoon up across Labrador, because there's way more snow on the way as we head through the rest of the week. Rainfall amounts pretty light for the most part. Avalon metro area, 10 to 20 millimeters possible, and the south coast, hence that rainfall warning, could see 30 to 50 millimeters or maybe even more than that as we head a little bit further south. Temperatures tomorrow well above zero for most of us, And again, very windy through the day. Those southeasters will be gusting anywhere from probably 60 to 90 kilometers per hour. And we're looking at a similar forecast up across Labrador as far as winds are concerned, but not until we get later in the day and into the first half of Thursday. Now, as far as our weather photo is concerned, it's a beautiful one. Speaking of some sunsets, here's a look at your photo of the day. This is a sunset last night. Tara Hamlin captured this one in Cowhead. Thank you so much for your weather photo. And if you have any weather photos that you would like to share with us, you can send them to my Facebook page or email them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Oh, another stunner. Thank you so much for that, Tara, and thank you, Ashley. Well, 2 teens from this province are about to experience the biggest event of their young curling lives so far. Kaylee Locke and Simon Perry are heading to the 2024 Youth Olympic Games in South Korea. They'll be representing Canada in mixed doubles curling, an opportunity they won in the fall during a national event in Edmonton. The CBC's Mike Moore caught up with the duo at their home rink in St. John's.
You're going to South Korea to represent Team Canada. How big is this moment?
It's hard to describe. It's definitely surreal, but also so exciting. And you know, we've been working really hard the past couple of months trying to prepare for this opportunity. So, you know, we're just excited to get up there and relax and have it all pay off, hopefully. So, yeah.
It's nice to have representatives from Newfoundland, and especially like with this Youth Olympics team, 2/3 of it is from the East Coast.
Okay.
that are going to Korea. So, you know, it's nice to have representatives, and everyone's so happy that we can have people from the club going.
You won a mixed doubles tournament in the fall. Was that your ticket in?
Yeah, so we were both selected by Curling Canada. There were 4 people selected for the mixed doubles. So we were one team, and then they had selected another. So we won in Edmonton, and that was our ticket to be Team Canada and represent at the Youth Olympics in Korea. So since that, we've been doing a lot of training here at the club with Jeff Thomas. We've had a couple spiels away, one in Edmonton and one in Halifax this past weekend, just as learning opportunities and trying to be as prepared as we can.
And for those who don't know, I mean, people see curling and it's generally 4 people aside. How is mixed doubles different?
It's chaotic. It's honestly, I think it's better for the viewer, especially if you don't know much about curling, because it's just, there's rocks everywhere. You're throwing these finesse shots or big weight shots, and it's a lot of fun.
The end starts with a rock in the back of the forefoot and then a guard. And then, so I throw first and last, and then he throws the middle 3 rocks. And the fun thing about mixed doubles is we can switch that up at any time. So like, we're not ingrained to our positions at all, which is pretty cool. It's definitely a lot faster, as he had said. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Is there anything you're most looking forward to?
Atmosphere, for sure. I know, like, tickets have already sold out for these games. I know for the mixed team especially. So we're going to a place where we're going to have a real atmosphere in the arena. It's going to be so cool to play.
Yeah, I think just like playing in such a venue, and we've never had that opportunity, especially wear the maple leaf on our back. Like, it's going to be a surreal moment, and yeah, no, just can't wait to get out on the ice.
We had a lot of people who had never acted before.
Andy wanted to make this film that pretty well had almost everybody in Newfoundland in it.
Well, stay with us. We're dedicating the back half of our show to a special CBC production about the cult classic that kickstarted the local film industry. The Trudeau government is poised to make a major fisheries decision later this month that will ripple throughout Atlantic Canada. It will decide who gets access to catch the massive redfish population in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. As Paul Withers reports, it's created a major interprovincial battle.
Before the Gulf redfish population collapsed in the early 90s, Nova Scotia's offshore fleet held half the overall quota. In the decades since, the companies carried out science surveys for fisheries and oceans, maintained a small fishery in adjacent areas, and spent millions on plants and licenses in anticipation of a reopening. Now that the population has rebounded, Quebec and Newfoundland interests are lobbying for a piece of the action, in part to compensate for a drastic reduction in shrimp quota for fleets in their province.
This is incredibly concerning, so it's not just me that's...
Nova Scotia wants Ottawa to maintain historic shares.
I would like for our quotas to be respected, in particular with this one, when our companies were the ones that pioneered this industry from the get-go.
Last fall, he told his federal counterpart to change these established allocations would bring significant economic hardships to these Nova Scotia-based fleets and the hundreds of jobs in coastal Nova Scotia communities that they support, warning the apparent trend of altering long-standing quota agreements threatens to destabilize investment in seafood infrastructure, market, and product development. Scotia Harvest spent $14 million on a state-of-the-art plant in Digby. Its president says the only decision here is the size of the quota. Who gets to catch it has already been settled.
We have expected quota. We made investments around it. We've continued to make investments. Others have, not just my company, but there's been investments in boats. Licenses and quotas have been bought, sold, and transferred between different participants. I just don't see how we do without it. I don't see what the alternative is, because if those quotas are not going to be respected, if those transactions lead to some harm to communities or to existing participants in favor of others, this is a zero-sum game.
Meanwhile, Federal Fisheries Minister Diane Leboutillier did not respond to Kent Smith. Her office says an announcement will be made at the end of the month. Paul Withers, CBC News, Halifax.
Well, it took Andy and Mike Jones years to make The Adventure of Faustus Biggood. The film went on to become a cult classic. The creators took aim at politics, the education system, and set this province apart from the rest of the country. Nearly 40 years on, the CBC's Danny Arsenault brings us the story behind the rebellious feature film.
Hi, my name is Andy Jones, and I co-wrote and co-directed The Adventure of Faustus Bidgood. It's a bizarre cult film.
Love, murder, mental illness, Newfoundland independence.
There's a sickness or darkness in there that's like a fish hook in your abdomen while you're laughing.
We were the very first feature film produced in Newfoundland.
And was the most insane style to make a film that you could imagine.
We had a lot of people who had never acted before. That's not necessarily a great idea.
People made movies in Hollywood. People didn't make movies in Newfoundland.
Fasten your seatbelts and come along for the ride.
And that's all I can say, I think. I don't know. You know, when I went to university after high school, I kind of always wanted to be an actor and a comedian. A bunch of us started in 1972 with the Newfoundland Traveling Theatre Company, and the members of CODCO all met in that company that year. It was a great time. It really felt like we were looking at ourselves as Newfoundlanders in a fun and critical way.
I'm a Newfoundlander, no? I'm a Newfoundlander. Break it up, pieces. I'm a Newfoundlander.
We were not afraid to make fun of Newfoundland, and we were not afraid to make fun of everywhere else who made fun of Newfoundland.
Maybe we don't have some of the advantages that some of your richer provinces got. Alberta, Ontario, and the like.
We were very, very nationalistic about Newfoundland at the time. When we went to Canada, we were definitely looked down on and made fun of and considered to be stupid, and we really, really, really found that difficult.
Every part of his body which had offended the Lord burst into flames.
We did a lot of stuff about the church, and we did a lot of comedy about the church, actually.
The Joneses have been stalking the church for years. Their last short film was a parody of a TV nature show, a hunting safari for the island's most unusual form of wildlife, the elusive wild nun of Newfoundland.
We did feel abandoned, and duped by the church in some way, because, they were talking out one side of their mouth about morality, and the other side of the mouth they were doing quite atrocious things, some of them.
Members of the Newfoundland clergy, like Father James Hickey, have had their fill of Faustus's creators. And it's not funny as far as you're concerned?
Not funny to the people. It's not funny to me. It ceases to be funny when it becomes offensive.
Emotions ran high in provincial court this morning as Father Jim Hickey pleaded guilty to the 20 sexual offenses.
We were partially angry about it, but partially also wanting to get it out there so that it existed out in public. I think we just didn't think anything could ever be done about it. The church was so powerful.
There was some really interesting work being done, and it felt revolutionary, it felt rebellious.
The film community in the early 70s was just barely getting on the go. When there was an NFB production that was related to Newfoundland, the crew came from somewhere else and shot it. That was it, gone. Really, there was no independent film, and there was no place for an artist who had ideas about making film could actually go.
In the 70s, the arts community was really bustling. There were a lot of organizations created. For me, most importantly, was NIFCO, which the Newfoundland Independent Filmmakers Cooperative started in '75. And as a young 16-year-old, I became close friends with this interesting character, Mike Jones, who had been a Christian brother and had given up the religion to enter film. He was the president of the organization, and him and my brother kind of led it.
Mike and I just talked film a lot. So we talked about making movies in Newfoundland.
And all of a sudden, right out of the blue, Andy and Mike start talking about making a feature film, and that feature film became Faustus Bidgood.
I sat down in my kitchen, I think it may have been January 1st, 1977, and I started to work on the ideas for this one character. A part of that idea was that we would write a film where Newfoundland leaves Confederation and becomes a republic on its own. We thought, what would it be like to have somebody be in charge who has absolutely no ambition? We wanted to go against the grain in terms of it being a hero story, so we had invented an anti-hero who has emotional, mental, spiritual difficulties, and this was Faustus Bidgood, and I played that character. We had script sessions like we would have sort of parties and ask all kinds of people over. People would give suggestions and tell stories, and it was like this very, very, very chaotic way of writing. And then eventually I would take the ideas and try to boil them down. No one knew anything. We didn't even know how to write a script. I had to find a copy of Citizen Kane and to see how you wrote it out on paper.
The script is generally around 120 pages for a feature film. This script gravitated between 200 and 300 pages, and it never really made any sense, but it was really interesting.
Frank, you should have seen the stripper out of the Friars Club. You would have loved it. Andy and I lived together, so I went through the whole goddamn thing of Faustus. Andy wanted to make this film that pretty well had almost everybody in Newfoundland in it.
It came to town like a whirlwind, swooping up all kinds of energy and enthusiasm, and it was fantastic.
Luckily, my brother was a filmmaker, so he always had that idea that inside all this chaos, there was a film. And he kept pushing me to pin it down and to stop, going out and to bring it down to something more, workable. It came to blows eventually. He just drove me to the point where one day I just punched him in the face. We had a hard time after that for a while, but we soon fixed it up.
Take a risk, take a chance, and you'll win it.
Well, the casting process was completely out of control. We would have, put an ad in the paper, if you want to be in the movie, come, to 77 Bond Street. We're having auditions, and we had a lot of people who had never acted before. And that's not necessarily a great idea, but mostly it worked for us. And then in the middle of this, of course, we had all of the CODCO members. We're all comedians who were kind of the core people of the movie, so we combined both. Yeah.
It was a source of a lot of domestic discord with me and Andy because I wanted a larger role. I was the person who, in the fantasy, was the girlfriend, and in the non-fantasy was someone who he had a crush on, who was inaccessible.
No one in this entire movie, except Mike, my brother Mike, who had worked as a second assistant cameraman on The Rowdy Man. No one had any experience that I know of.
Once the script was on the page, it was Mike that had to take the script off the page.
I really loved the collaboration that I had with my brother, Mike. He had such great ideas, and we really played off each other well. Like, I had lots of ideas about the acting and what should be in the scene, and then he was, picturing it in his own mind as a piece of film, and he was thinking composition and all those things that I didn't know anything about, still don't know anything about.
Mike really knew what he was doing, and it was really serious, and Andy is pretty special to be around. There's a great energy that surrounds him.
We all had infinite energy because we were in our 20s, and we were very excited about what we were doing. We really felt like, wow, like we're real filmmakers. We were able to improvise on the day, make up new stuff, give people new lines. Everyone was up for that. So the morale was high. It was a very exciting time.
I was in Gander for the weekend.
What were you doing in Gander?
What wasn't I doing in Gander, my dear? It's more to the point.
Oh my God, I was a baby. I didn't know anything. I just wanted a lot. I had a lot of ambition, like Faustus Bidgood, and know where to put it, not knowing what to do with it at all.
It was just like chaos, but organized chaos. You're just trying to get to the point where everybody, crew, actors, was there for that moment when action happens.
So we were doing all the jobs all the time. We were producing, directing, acting, setting up the cameras, and learning. Everyone was learning.
I certainly didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I was just along for the ride. I wanted the experience. I was kind of willing to do anything, but most importantly, I would work for free.
Of course, we had no money, so no one got paid. Everyone got paid a share in the movie. We had an elaborate system. You took the number of hours you worked that day. So if you were assistant cameraman, there was a union rate for that, and so you got that many shares. And then at the end, you have all the shares at the bottom, and then your number of shares on top of that, and that fraction became your ownership of the profits.
I think it says here that there's really no hope that this film is ever going to make a profit, but you might get some money out of it if we have some sales.
We actually did make that one sale, and so we wrote 400 checks. You know, some of them were for $3.25, and some were for, you know, $1.47.
I know what I got from it was just enough to buy a new stove for my house. And it only took 12 or 15 years to get the money.
But I never felt exploited. Like, I wanted to work on film, and this was the greatest thing. And at the time, you know, the Faustus Bidgood experience seemed completely normal to me, and like, this is how films are made. In the scene where Brian Hennessy goes into the liquor store dressed up as a chicken, we didn't even tell the liquor store we were filming. We just like walked in with the Bolex with Brian and just shot it, and the guy who looks his head up and reacts to it, he had no idea what was going on and didn't even know that he was in the movie until it came out. It was like, that would be unheard of. But that happened all the time. It was only later in life, as I worked on other films and more kind of establishment kind of films, that I realized the Faustus Bidgood experiment was a one-of-a-kind deal that only could happen with Mike and Andy and would probably never happen again, and was the most insane style to make a film that you could imagine.
I sort of doubted we ever would finish it at various points. I thought, oh, well, it'll just be fun to look at the Russians and have a few laughs. I started writing in 1977. We shot most of it in the summer of '78, and then we kind of ran out of steam and definitely ran out of money. We never had any money anyway. You know, so we did other things during that. We kind of let Faustus Bidgood just sit there for those years. And then we kind of like got ourselves together to really work hard to make sure it happened, and it got edited. So we were in Montreal in 1982 and trying to edit the movie. So we decided to go see John Catadotis, who was the head of production or something at National Film Board, head of the whole thing.
The National Film Board at the time had a big film processing lab. They had all the gear, they had everything.
His secretary said, "Oh no," she said, "he can't see you. He's busy, you know." Like, and we said, "Well, we don't care. Like, it hasn't been your day. Like, you know, can we get an appointment with him?" And she said, "No." She said, "He's got no free time." So we left the office, and Mike said to me, he said, "He's got to go to the bathroom, right?" I said, "Yeah." So we actually went and we stood outside the bathroom near his office at the National Film Board, and we waited for him to go to the bathroom, which he eventually did, of course. And on the way out, we grabbed him, told him our story, and convinced him to help us. So we got this little editing suite. They invested the time in it. And then, of course, there was this massive job of editing this 40 hours of film. So it was actually put in freezers and kept for years, some cases, before we even got to see the footage. So we didn't know if we actually got the shot or not. You know, so there could have been important scenes completely missing, but luckily none of them were. After a while, we cut it down. We started throwing out, so we definitely don't want this. Eventually, we saw a story that was winding through all this material. And then we realized in order to make that story work, we had to go back and shoot more stuff.
So it wasn't like a traditional film where you shoot for 30 or 40 days and then you finish the film. This was a film that shot for a couple of 100 days over a number of years.
One of the hazards of filming over 10 years is that cast members grew older with every scene. Some died, others were born, like Maisie Riley's daughter, Claire. When the filming began, Maisie was pregnant with Claire during this scene.
They usually hang people for treason.
7 years later, the daughter in her womb had landed a part of her own as a guest in his birthday party for young Faustus.
It was always a bit of a joke, right? Oh, that'll never get done. Ah, yeah.
I didn't think, oh, it's never going to be done or anything like that. I just thought, wow, this is taking way too long and I'm not in it enough. These were my two thoughts.
So it could have sat there. It could have maybe never, and it would have just been a bit fun to look at. But luckily, Mike had that vision.
You know, there's great stories, wonderful stories of Mike sleeping in the room with the Steenbeck, sleeping on the floor, sleeping on the couch at NIFCO. This was his passion. This was his baby.
So he ended up shooting again in 83 and 84, and a little bit in 85, I think, also. And then, so Mike took all that stuff and painstakingly edited that together all those years. And finally, by 1986, which was 9 years after I sat down first to write, we premiered the movie in St. John's.
Hope you like the film.
You know, we were just so happy to have it done and to see that it looked really interesting and really different. There's nothing like it in the world.
When I saw it for the first time with an audience, people were roaring, laughing, and hooting and everything else.
I was home and I saw it at the premiere. What a celebration. The opus was done. Everybody was talking about Faustus and everybody had, you know, constantly people say, so how's Faustus going? When are we going to see Faustus? And then this was the miracle of the completion of Faustus and then launching it out into the world. I think there was incredible pride that this was ours. In whatever way you had participated, this collectively was ours.
not a lot to do here except play music and have a good time, you know.
Yeah, you know, unemployment breeds creativity.
You know, when Friday came around, it wasn't like, oh, what are we going to do? It was just like, okay, who's playing at the hall tonight?
Just when that, you know, Seattle thing was just affecting like the radio and stuff, there was this whole amazing scene that was happening here.
We just really wanted to sound like what we were listening to.
What had been a vibrant underground scene at that particular point exploded.
He was the one who was organizing most of the shows.
He was this enigma that just lived at CHMR.
I don't know what made it so special then, but it was special.
Well, last night Here and Now sent a movie reviewer to attend the premiere of The Adventure of Faustus Bidgood. That reviewer is Gordon Jones, and he's in the studio with me now. Gordon, why don't you tell the people what you thought of this movie?
In those days, you were scared to death of the critics. They said really bad things about you, and they would say they could keep people away. And sure enough, when Faustus Bidgood came out, man, we got some bad reviews.
The film is disjointed and repetitive in structure. And despite its craziness, it's not very funny because in most respects, it's heavy-handed and self-indulgent.
Yeah, that Gordon Jones review, man, God rest his soul, he has since died, but he went out of his way almost to do that review on TV, which no one else ever did before or since, I don't think. So that was harsh.
Sound levels are variable throughout, and sound quality is often abominable.
It was especially hard for Mike, and he was angry about that, and I think he felt that they were, to some extent, ignorant of the medium.
I'd say he wasn't surprised by it, and it didn't hold him back. He was quite fine saying, this is what the establishment thinks of the show, and you should come see it.
Well, I still think people should have a look at it, if only to satisfy their curiosity.
Oh, it may be fine in the province. I don't think it'll fly much beyond the borders.
We went to see Faustus in Nova Scotia, and it got a great, I think we got a standing ovation. People were just blown away by it. They loved it.
I think I first saw Faustus Bidgood when it was touring the country in the late 1980s, and I was living in Winnipeg, and this thing rolled into town. But I remember it blowing my mind, leaving me puzzled as to what the hell was going on.
You know, it's a complex film. It's not a formulaic, there isn't any rubber booting in it. It's not a rowdy man.
In markets that had a thriving art house community that enjoyed watching film art, it did very well.
And I'm constantly surprised by the young crowd who seem to have cottoned on to it now. Because for a while there, it had gone into, nobody remembered it really. And it was done, and it had its big explosive opening, and then it kind of went silent. And now it seems to be, making a return.
Yep, I've had lots of people say great things to me. I was downtown walking, and a young woman stopped me and said, "Oh my God, you were from that movie, you made that movie," and she's just in her 20s, and she just loved it.
It's not simply an important Newfoundland film, which it is, but it is also a very important Canadian film in terms of our film history from that period.
In the 1970s, the Canadian film industry, feature filmmaking, was really just getting established. In the early 1970s, we have a film like Going Down the Road, which is the iconic Canadian film. And that set the template for the assumption of what Canadian film should be, that it should be realist, that it should look, kind of like a documentary. The Adventure of Faustus Bidgood is really one of a kind, and it is unlike anything else going on in filmmaking in Canada in the 1970s, certainly.
It did take a long time for people to kind of come around and say, oh my God, this is really interesting, it's really different, it's ahead of its time, it's bizarre. It's a cult classic, I'd say.
It was extraordinary because you thought, wow, okay, they could do it, I can do it. If they can do it, why can't I do it? It opened that door, like people made movies in Hollywood. People didn't make movies in Newfoundland, right?
Well, we always say that we were the very first feature film ever produced in Newfoundland. So Gordon Pinson beat us to it with The Rowdy Man, but it wasn't produced in Newfoundland. And of course, The Viking beat everything in Canada, but it was produced outside of Newfoundland, so it's quibbling. But yeah, we were the first ever feature film. I think to some extent, the big influence that Faustus Bidgood had was we finished it, we did it. We actually made it happen. It can be done here.
It was the start of the film industry that we know today. Start right there. Faustus.
Newfoundland hasn't been dragged into a movie like this. A film hasn't been made where everything in the movie is us, is our political system, is our way of thinking about things. Is, it's just the foolishness that we have as a crowd.
So you're kind of hoping this may launch you off of the rock to some extent?
Well, just for a little while, just a few trips. That's all. Not. I don't want to get away from here. Where else is there to go, really?
I'd say that Mike was the godfather of our film movement in the province here, and quite a godfather he was.
I have used this film in Canadian cinema classes. Faustus Bidgood needs to be understood as one of a kind, as this distinct work of the imagination that comes out of Newfoundland in the 1970s and into the 80s, but it represents this energy, this spirit of independence and defiance. You think we can't make a film here? Well, we'll show you. Not only will we make it, but it'll be a film that will blow your mind because you won't have a category to put it in. And that in itself is worth knowing about and worth preserving.
Fasten your seatbelts and come along for the ride. And it'll take you to interesting places that you would not have thought of yourself. And I mean, that's what you want a film to do. You want a film to take you somewhere that you can't go on your own.
I think we did something about Newfoundland and about the politics of Newfoundland, the education system of Newfoundland, and just the sense of humor of Newfoundland. It's in that movie in a way that I don't think any of those things are captured anywhere else quite. This is me talking about my own movie now, but I think that's true.
What an interesting look back at the birth of the local film industry in our province. Our thanks to video producer Danny Arsenault for putting that documentary together for us. Now, we want to tell you about a special interview coming tomorrow night on Here and Now. On the Go host Anthony Germain is sitting down with Nicole Kiley, the deputy mayor of Mount Pearl, to talk about an ordinary errand that marked the start of a brutal, life-changing chapter and a very long road to recovery. Last year, Kiley was struck by an SUV outside a St. John's drugstore, and she was awake for the whole thing.
This scene is incredibly unsafe for the people who were in the store, for the first responders that would need to go to the store. We don't know what could have structurally happened, like that whole...
The car is half in, half out.
Half in, half out. The whole wall could have come down. The car could have come down. So first responders were there almost immediately and working with me along with the young gentleman who was holding my hand.
Well, hope you can join us tomorrow for that feature interview with the Deputy Mayor of Mount Pearl, Nicole Kiley. And tomorrow, of course, we'll also have your local news and weather. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. See you tomorrow.